going to spend this morning on is actually going through the training manual. So if you'd like to pull it out, you all have a copy of the ABIL Peer Mentor Training Manual. And I'm just going to walk you through some of the sections so you can get an idea of why we put it in there, why we feel it's important. Feel free to ask questions about the section. We'll get to some forms so you can actually look at those. And I apologize, I know the large print has a different page number, so if you have that page number, holler it out at me, okay? So we're just going to break this down and go section by section. Yeah?
The large print version of the slides, the page numbers are correct, so
oh,
they
that
still refer to the right
page. Okay. Oh, thank you, Tim. Okay, so Tim said the large print version of the slides, if you look there, that will refer to the correct page number for the training manual. So you have that in your large print copy of slides. Okay. So on pages 8 and 17, we include a section on independent living philosophy. And there's a reason why we do this right at the beginning of the training, because this is who we are, this is what we believe. And so I've been a volunteer, and from my perspective, when I volunteer, I want to know, who are these people? Why should I give time to them? Do their beliefs line up with my beliefs? And so that's why we start very first with independent living philosophy. And so we show the Ed Roberts 60 Minutes interview. Anybody familiar with that? Yeah. Our media guy and I used to joke that we could probably act it out because we've seen it more than anybody at the center. But it's a very good video. It's available on YouTube if you don't have a copy of it. Unfortunately, CBS doesn't make it anymore, but you can click it on and get it on YouTube. But very good. So we always introduce them first to Ed Roberts because he's the father. He's the one who started this. And that video, even though it's older, I mean, it really, everything he says is so spot on. So it really gives people an idea of where are we in the movement, what's the history. Usually the person that teaches our independent living skills section is our CEO, Phil. And so, yes, of course, I could teach this, but I want them to meet Phil. And it really means a lot to the mentors. Surprised me, but it really means a lot to them that Phil would come in and take the time to meet them. And he spends a good amount of time and really walks them through some of the history pieces. And so that really means a lot to people, to meet him, to hear what he envisions for ABIL, and also to have him walk us through independent living philosophy. Occasionally, if we have time, maybe at a lunch break, I might show Module 1 and 2 of the ILRU history video that's available on their website, so I use that as well. Because most of the people that we have come through the training are like I was. You know, I had no class on disability history in high school or college. I didn't know my own history. And so this really kind of is a way to really give people a foundation of where are we going, where have we been. Pages 18 to 23, that's the ABIL section. So again, it's that who are we piece. What are the programs? How long have we existed? What are our funders? Really, volunteers want to know all of that. They have questions about, you know, how did you guys come into existence? So we can really spend some time and give them a kind of the history of ABIL. And we focus on the programs that their mentees are going to be working with. So it helps them kind of get a lay of the land, so to speak. Information referral, that's a real brief section. It's on page 24 to 25. The reason why we moved that, it used to be towards the middle of the training, but when we saw our evaluations, we do evaluations with people at the end of the training, and I started doing evaluations with people before the training. And so what I noticed was the questions that people had, the fears, were a lot about, what do I do if I don't know the answer? What if somebody has a question and I have no idea what the community resource is? So it really made sense for us to move that earlier on the training so that we could take that worry away for people, really affirm to them that they're not on their own in this. They don't have to figure out the resource. They can call me. They can talk to the information referral coordinator. We give them different resources. So it really relieves the fear that I've got to figure this out by myself. And then we do a little brief introduction on page 27 through 30 about just the volunteer program. So we go over some of the basics of the Peer Mentor program. And again, we had that later in the training and have over the years moved that closer to the front because, again, people have some basic questions that they really want to get answered right away. They don't want to wait till day 2 till they find out, you know, how do you make a match? How do I know if you have somebody for me? You know, how often do I have to meet? All those kind of basic questions. It's great to be able to relieve people's concerns or fears right away. And then we get to lunchtime and we bring in a couple of our peer mentors, our longtime peer mentors. And they come in and, you know, they'll talk about their experience briefly, and then they'll answer questions, and then they stay for lunch. So it gives people a chance, if maybe they're not comfortable to ask questions in front of the whole group, they can kind of pick the mentor's brain over lunch. And again, this helps them get an idea of who are the mentors, what would I be expected to do. It relieves a lot of concerns and fears, and it's a great way for them to kind of get an idea of where are we going. We developed our adaptation to disability, you'll see that on page 31 through 36, based on the ideas of Kubler-Ross. Is everybody familiar with Dr. Kubler-Ross? So what she did was she did a lot of research and study around death and dying. And she noticed that through her work in hospice that there were certain stages that people went through in the grieving process. And so Amina actually originally wrote this piece, and over the years we've tweaked it and changed it as we needed to. But the idea is that somebody newly diagnosed or newly injured, there is a grieving process that they're going to go through. And so we really try to educate the mentors. You'll see in the manual that we give them the stages of grief. We walk them through that. I usually don't teach this section. I usually bring in our early intervention coordinator to teach this section. Why do I do that? Well, he's the one who every day, all day, is working in the hospitals, talking to people who are newly diagnosed, newly injured. And so he really brings a perspective and can answer questions. What do you do if somebody is in that anger stage? And he can share stories. What do you do when someone's very depressed? How do we talk to them? So he brings a whole different perspective because that's what he does in his job every day. Now, one key change that I want to point out is that the last stage of the grieving process for Kubler-Ross is acceptance. And we've modified that because I don't know that that's possible for disability. I don't think that there's a day where the light shines down and we're like, yay, glad this happened, and I'm okay with it completely. It's a little bit different when you're talking about disability there and death and dying. So we've changed that to adjustment or adaptation. So we think that's a little more realistic. So where we want to see people end up is that not that they have a great day every day, but they always have the awareness that I can do what I need to get done. No, I'm going to be in pain, there might be bad days, but I can still accomplish what I need to do. And so that's more about adapting to our disabilities versus having some sort of acceptance or a complete journey where we're okay with everything. We're going to have good days and bad days. So we do change that and clarify that in our training manual. Communication. This is a huge section for us. So we, on page 37, I think, 38, 39, we have a self-evaluation that we use with the mentors, which is kind of fun. We take a break. We have them flip through the self-evaluation. And I kind of do it informally, so I just have them check off something that jumps out to them or something they wish they did better. So, for example, maybe somebody says, gosh, I don't make good eye contact, and I need to do better about that. Or, I formulate my response to somebody, and I stop listening to them because I'm coming up with my response. So we can really have a good conversation with people about what are those habits that we can change a little bit, that we can work on. So I always tell this story about my brother, who I love very much. He's a wonderful person. But he has the ability to be watching a football game and still hear everything I'm saying, which really annoys me. Since we've grown up, it always annoys me. I do not have that ability. So for me, if I'm going in and talking to him, that's really frustrating that he does that. But he is hearing me. He does respond appropriately usually. So sometimes it's good to highlight with the mentors. There's things that maybe you're okay with that's really going to be hard for somebody else. And so your job as a peer mentor is to be able to identify what you do and how you might modify that or observe in your mentee something that they do and how you can adapt to what they do. So if you have a mentee that is, distracted and not looking at you, understand that maybe that's the way they communicate and figure out how can I work with that, how can I adapt that. Or maybe you have a mentee who is better at communication by email. So the important things are something they need time to write out and think about. So it really gives people kind of an idea of how do I communicate, what's specific to me, but how do I adapt that so that I'm working with my mentee in the best way possible and communicating in the best way possible. Any questions about that section? Okay. Language and etiquette, people first language. Page 50 to 52 is our people first language. We have an article in there by Kathy Snow, and we have copyright permission for that. She has a great website that has a lot of good information on people first. And she's a mom of an adult child with a developmental disability and has been a leader in writing about people first. And so we have some articles from her in there. Sometimes I think we make the assumption that because we're training people with disabilities, they're going to be good on this, that they don't need this. And really, most of the people that I train, this is their first time being exposed to people first language and really having conversations about language and etiquette and how do we work with each other? How do we provide accommodations to each other? So we're kind of the expert on our own disability. So if I'm talking to somebody with CP, they might not have any idea how to talk about a mental health disability. But as a peer mentor, I need them to have those skills. I need them to have that language and etiquette so that they can comfortably interact with other people with disabilities. I remember a training I was doing once. This was not an ABIL training, but I had gone to the hospital and was doing a training. And it was really reinforced to me how important this was. There was a person in the training class, and in the middle of my presentation, she started having a seizure. And so we did everything that we needed to do, and she was okay, and we were calling the ambulance and stuff. And I looked over at somebody else attending the training, a gentleman with a spinal cord injury. Very young, athlete, tattoos, he was a young guy. And he was just mortified. He was freaked out. And you could just see that he was not okay with what was happening here. And I thought, that's so important because his world has been spinal cord injury. Now he's being asked to kind of take that first step into the world of other disability. And you could see how uncomfortable he was. Really nice guy, but just that was a whole brand new experience for him. So this is why the language and etiquette stuff is so important, because we don't want to make the assumption that people are going to know what to do, know how to respond to each other. One of my favorite things to do is really walk people through low vision etiquette, because that can be very confusing for people. How do I help? How do I provide assistance? How do I talk about low vision and blindness? And so it really is, we break it down, it's very specific, and we walk people through and give them specific ideas of the language that they can use, how they can help, what questions should they ask. So we really want people to hopefully feel a sense of confidence or comfort in going forward and being around other people with disabilities that maybe they've not had exposure to before. So any questions about that? Yeah.
So I'm looking at page 50, people first language, and it says don't give excessive praise. Why would you not do excessive? Could it be patronizing kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Sometimes we caution people about,
Oh, you're so special. You're amazing.
Yeah.
I could never do what you do.
Yeah. I remember being in my wheelchair one time, and I was out shopping, and somebody was like, "Oh, good for you," and I was like, "Okay, thanks." So that kind of stuff, where praise and encouragement about things that somebody's worked hard for and that's important. That's what we want to do. We want to be careful about that condescending, kind of patronizing. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and,
right.
and there is as much misperception about disability within the disability
Yes.
community as there is outside
Hello.
about other disabilities you're not familiar with. And so the same patronizing stuff that happens in the outside world
Right.
happens on the inside world
Right.
towards each other. And so we're trying to inoculate them
Right.
from that experience.
You know what, and I think this is probably something that I've got tougher and firmer about over the years is that, you know, I used to have people that would come and fill out the application and they would quietly kind of say, well, I'm not good with mental health, don't match me with that. Or I'd have somebody that was in a wheelchair and would say, well, learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, that's not okay. And you know what? Some of that I can teach and I can train. That's why we do that part. But ultimately, I need peer mentors that have an awareness and the ability, anything I can teach, they can, you know, if they're willing to learn, I'll teach it. But they've got to have an understanding of we are a center for independent living that works with all disabilities. And so my peer mentor program has got to be for all disabilities, and I need mentors that are comfortable and can adapt and work with anyone with a disability. So we really I'm a lot firmer about, you know, let's address those stereotypes, let's get rid of that bias, because that can't happen in our peer mentor program. I mean, I remember looking through, and again, different time, but you know, an application that was from like 20 years ago, and somebody had put on, you know, no gays. And today, that would not happen in our program. So the world has changed, our program has to change with it, and again, we've got to have people that are willing to work with anyone. That's the skill a peer mentor needs to have.
So this starts to happen in the orientation training because there are people with different disabilities in there as potential mentors and as trainers. But as we know, what makes the difference is familiarity. Mm-hmm. And so that's another good point for your mentoring group, which is a way to do ongoing skill development, but also more of that interaction. Because I don't know about you guys, but no matter what people come to our center for, and when we do an evaluation, more than the topic, it's always the first thing people say they love the most is meeting other people with different disabilities.
It really is true. That's always one of the things on our evaluations that we get back. And the good news is the vast majority of people you work with, they'll say to you, I don't know, but I'll try. Can you teach me? You know, I'm a little nervous, but you know, I'll give it a shot. And so that's where you have the opportunity. Those are the people you want. Not that they have to know how to do everything. That's why we have training. That's why we have ongoing training. That's why we do disability liberation theory, which Amina will talk about later, because we can educate people and get people comfortable with these kind of issues. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm under the impression that the truest enemy of disability is ignorance, just not knowing. Because there's a staunch difference between ignorance and stupidity. Ignorance is not knowing, and stupidity says that, well, I don't know, but what I think is probably right anyways.
Yeah.
So do you guys do anything to address the, you know, what happens when you assume kind of issue? Do you bring up effective and efficacious question asking and things like that?
We do. We touch a little bit on that on our communication section, and we also touch on that a little bit in our helping versus dependency section about, you know, how do I go into a situation and not make assumptions? What am I listening for so that I can make sure that I understand? We give people cues about active listening and reflective listening. So they're saying, we actually give them a statement, you know, an example statements where it's, let me make sure I understood you. Did you say this? Am I hearing you correctly? So we actually train them on some of those statements so that they're not jumping in that they're assuming, but they're stopping and using some reflective listening, some active listening to make sure that they're hearing what their mentee is truly saying.
And those sections, to a certain extent, as long as time allows, will be sort of interactive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where you say what might be an example of effective listening, what might be an example of just barely hearing.
Yeah. Exactly. And I brought some of I like to do case studies with them. This is something I've done for the last 2 or 3 years with our peer mentor training class. And it's really, I take real life situations that have happened and I'll walk them through. And so they each get assigned a case in their team, and then they'll, you know, be walked through. And a lot of it is about language, about, you know, how do I help. So one example, which I kind of like, is, you know, just simple things where it's, so the mentee states they want to learn dial-a-ride. That's paratransit. But they got tired of waiting and hung up. and didn't ever request the application. And so what might a mentor say to this? And so we teach them, what are some of the questions you should ask? What's the emotion behind that? It's frustration. Maybe it's, impatience. Maybe it's, I don't even understand what paratransit is. Somebody told me I should do this and I don't know what it is. So we really teach them to think through a situation so that if somebody says, I don't want to do this or this didn't work, that they can kind of follow up and make sure that they understand the situation. So maybe it's nobody's ever filled out an application with them because the person just thought they didn't qualify or something. Or maybe it's, I can't read the application, so I never filled it out. I remember one gentleman, he was, we couldn't figure out, he had the phone number for Social Security, and he'd said he'd called, but it never kind of was getting resolved. And so, the mentor and I had talked about it, and we'd had a conversation with the mentee. Come to find out, it was, he would be on hold, and his anxiety would go up, and he would get stressed out, and he would hang up. And then he'd say, well, I took care of it. Well, he never actually got to a person. So what we did is we said, well, hey, we're not going to make the phone call for you. We're not going to speak for you, because this was certainly a gentleman who could speak for himself. But why don't you come into the office, sit with the peer mentor while you're on hold for 15 minutes. You guys can chat and hang out and have some coffee, and then you're not getting so stressed out. And that's what he did. And so he was able to get through to that operator. He knew the questions to ask, and that's how we resolved the situation. But it was about following up and making sure we understood what it was. Yeah.
I was wondering if you've ever used this or adapted this curriculum for reception staff?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, certainly parts of the language and
Yeah.
the people
Yeah.
first, they get.
Our
everybody
employees
gets
do that, yeah.
orientation.
Is your mic on?
Sorry, I'll repeat it. Yeah, certainly the people first language and adequate crease is part of every staff member's orientation.
Right.
And one of the groups we've had to do a little extra training with is the van drivers. Interesting, because they have really kind of close consumer contact. And we've had some issues with them not really understanding and not being as comfortable with disability. They tend to be not people with disabilities and have come from other kinds of careers, and it's just a driving job when they start out. And so that's on an as-need basis. But we have pieces of this that we pull out in different places, and that's a really good, it's really good to have all your staff get oriented in this.
Yeah.
And we have this right on our website, too, for people.
Well, we use at our agency for some of the reception. It's a program called Experience Works. It's a federal program for people who want to go back to work over the age of 55.
Oh.
So I think having the communication piece will be pretty helpful.
Yeah.
We go through, we show them some videos and talk about the ABIL movement, but this will be great. Thanks.
Good idea. And we've had customer service trainings for our reception staff, too.
You mentioned the van drivers. This has been something that's been an ongoing. We have 2 great van drivers right now. And just recently I was thinking about it, about how much they have shifted to, really understanding that the event continues when they go home, that they want them to have a good experience on the way home as well. And I'll get updates from Mike, the van driver, about, call so-and-so, they wanted to chat with you after the group, and he really helps me kind of know how are people processing
Yeah, they're great
things.
spies for us,
Yeah.
to kind of
Yeah.
tell us. On the other hand, we had one van driver we had to let go because he was just too easily moved to frustration and anger. He didn't have the patience that was needed and some of those communication skills. So.
And they talk a lot with the mentors about tone. If you're working with an individual with a developmental disability, tone and the way you're speaking, that's very important to them. I have a volunteer who has a traumatic brain injury, and he is constantly, because it's very obvious that he has a brain injury, and it affects his speech, and he has very loud speech, which he can't modulate. And so every single interaction that he has with strangers all day are uncomfortable, and he feels talked down to. And so when he came to volunteer at the center, him and I really had to work on, you're safe here. I'm giving you instructions, but I'm not going to talk down to you. The other volunteers want to help you. We're not here to tell you what to do, because he is very, very sensitive to that tone and the way people talk, and so we want to be careful about that. That's important.
I was wondering, how do you have because I know our disability community in Portland, even though it's a big city, it's pretty small. And so everybody kind of knows each other. And I know when I first started working at our SIL, I was probably one of the first people with a master's degree in clinical training. And so there was some resistance to that. And so I would say, I'm a peer with specialized training. But in doing some of the volunteer training, there was a lot of resistance to the idea of boundaries and rules, and that's not peer mentoring, and that's not the independent living movement, because, they had that idea that if...
The medical model.
Yeah, it was just a medical model, and boundaries are not a good thing.
Sure. I mean, occasionally I'll have somebody that comes through the training and pushes back and says, well, maybe like when we get to the language and etiquette piece, I remember somebody who was like, well, April, I'm okay if my friends call me GIMP, and that's good with me, and I'm not going to stop using that word. And I said, great, that's okay in your life, do that. I'm not telling you what to do when you're on your own time. But I am telling you, when you're acting as a peer mentor, that if you use that word with somebody, that could be very harmful. And think of it that way. And so a lot of times when people come back about boundaries, why can't I drive somebody, they need to get to this. And I'm coming back and saying, well, you're not going to be there forever. We want them to learn how to do it so that when you're gone, that they can continue doing it on their own. So really kind of coming back and reminding people that the boundaries are really there to help keep them safe, to help the mentees be safe and learn. So sometimes I can come back and push and pull with people. I remember there was one mentor, though, when I took over. She was very adamant that that this was her calling, which I appreciated. A lot of my mentors feel that this is their calling, and I get that. Because we feel that way about our jobs, too. But she was also very adamant that the people that she was going to work with, she would say things like, I am here for you forever, we are family, and I am never going anywhere, whatever you need. And so I really tried to work with her on that and say, listen, I'm not making a marriage. You don't know that you're going to be there forever. That's why you have to teach the skills. And we went back and forth, and we kind of agreed to disagree, and she amicably left the program. And occasionally I'd invite her to a party or something, so I'd see her every once in a while. I kid you not, this was the very beginning of when I took over the program, so 2006. Last year she called me, the person who was going to be here forever and never leave. She called me and she said, April, what's the center in Texas? She's like, I'm moving next week. And I just had to laugh because I thought, that was the whole point that I could never get through to her about was, you don't know what's going to happen. You're not going to be here forever. So sometimes people push back about the boundaries, and you're not going to get them, and I have to just know that I did my best and let it go. But I can't use them. I really got to have people that understand the boundaries, respect it. They can have questions about it. That's okay. And even some of it they might not like. Like I'll have a mentor who occasionally will say, you know what, I want to buy them a cup of coffee. I'm really annoyed that I can't do that sometimes, or I want to get a Christmas gift for them, and I'm bugged that you don't let me do that, and so we'll have that conversation. So it's okay for them not to agree with it. It's okay for them to come talk to me about it, and sometimes, we can work through it, and other times we can't. And so as the coordinator, you have to decide what you can reasonably let go and what you can't. Helping versus dependency, a couple of years ago we did a survey with our peer mentors, and we asked them, these were people who had mentored for us at least 1 year, we asked them what was the most important part of the training for you, or what piece did you struggle with the most or have to refer back to, and it was helping versus dependency, which totally makes sense when you think about it, because I think this is what we struggle with as staff sometimes. Have I done enough? Have I given enough information? Have I offered every opportunity? Am I helping too much? Am I helping too little? All of those kind of judgment things that we all struggle with, the peer mentors struggle with that too. And so how do I know when I need to respect boundaries and respect their right to choose? One of my longtime mentors, she had been working with a mentee and her husband. And the mentee was about ready to lose their home. And the mentor called me and was very frustrated. And she was frustrated because we had given resources, things that they could do to, try to save the home, to get some government help. And they had gone and sat in those meetings and took the information. So we knew we had done everything we could. And I said, hey, what are you struggling with right now? She's like, I'm frustrated. They're losing their home. And so I started talking to her about it. And she's a home renovator. So she has 10 different properties by chance. And so home ownership and properties, that's the American dream to her. But when I got to talking to her about it, asking questions, I said, wait, I hear your mentee saying, though, that they're overwhelmed by having to care for this home. They can't get the yard work done. It's overwhelming. They're tired of it. I hear them saying that. Are you hearing that? And so she stopped and thought about it, and she was like, April, they want to let this home go, don't they? And I was like, yeah, they do. And that was the root of it. So she had a completely different philosophy about home ownership and the way she thought about the world. They were looking at it from, this is too much, we're tired. We don't want to have to worry about when the plumbing breaks or the weeds are growing. We want to go to an apartment. We just want to have somebody else take care of it. That was the bottom line. So here she was offering all this help, frustrated that it wasn't working, but she was just not hearing what they were trying to say to her. So those kind of boundaries are always hard, and so that's when you want the mentors to call you and talk it over. I have another mentor right now that his mentee is on his 5th or 6th employment network, so he's almost done all of them that he can do in our area. And so he always gets the first job. And, it starts well, but then he gets frustrated and quits. So this has gone on for a while. The last time he quit was because no one should smoke at the office. So he quit the job. And then another job he quit because people were buying too many books at the bookstore, stuff like that, So, of course, this is very frustrating to the mentor to hear because he's saying to me, April, but he needs this job if he wants to move out of his parents' house. And I'm like, I know. And I said to him the other day, I said, you know what? I said, until your mentee is actively, regularly taking his depression medication and doing what he needs to do with his counselor, he's going to struggle with this because he's overwhelmed. And so he's going in, getting overwhelmed, and it's like any excuse to get out of that job. And so the mentor was like, that's it. That's what I need to think about. And so it allowed him to release the frustration of, I've got to find him an employment network. Where can he volunteer? Where can he get a job next? And really release that and understand that his job is just there to support the mentee and to, facilitate some of that discussion about frustration. So, again, sometimes it's about understanding where the mentor's coming from and where the mentee's really at. Amina's going to talk a little bit more about this section, which is disability awareness and liberation. And really, we're walking people through what are those stereotypes, what are those things that you believe about your disability, how does that impact how you interact with the world, how does that impact how you interact with each other as people with disabilities. And so we'll talk a lot more about that. It's a really powerful piece. And I'm not just saying this because Amina is my boss, but because I know that this is every training I do, it's always the highest rated section of our training. What did you like the best? It's always at the top. So people really connect with this information, and it's really been a way for us to move people from some of those barriers and stereotypes towards more independence and advocacy. So we'll talk a lot more about that later this afternoon. Self-advocacy, of course, we give some tips, we give advocacy resources. It's really important to me that the mentor understands some of those self-advocacy skills, that they can use those in their own life. I've got to have a peer mentor that, has the ability to really advocate for themselves so that they can in turn advocate for someone else. And so we really walk them through what makes a good advocate, what do we do wrong sometimes when we're advocating and we've just told off our doctor's office for the third time and we're wondering why they don't call us back. Some of those things. What do we do sometimes when we're frustrated? Who are our allies? How do we do documentation? If you called and talked to somebody at Medicare, did you write their name down? Did you write when you talked to them? Those kind of things, so that the mentors really understand, step by step what they can do for themselves as self-advocates, and then how can they in turn advocate for others. And then we also include a piece about systems advocacy, because we want to start roping our mentors into really a global perspective, thinking about the community, and really thinking about how educated are they about disability issues. Some of them are, some of them are not. And so a lot of them get excited about the workshops and classes that we offer about different programs, different advocacy issues, things going down at our legislature. And so we start from the beginning talking to them about that, because we hope that that will be something that they will become aware of and get involved in. Goal planning section. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry to put the brakes on. I was curious. Our particular agency has something that we do as a volunteer training and orientation, and we assess a lot of what you guys talked about in terms of ABIL philosophy and some of the more basic communication skills. And what we're kind of looking at doing is having a second day where we address the more peer specific, whether it be peer support groups or which ours are all community based now, like organic peer support versus just direct peer mentorship. Do you think it's sufficient if we address some of these more your HIPAA stuff, your informed consent kind of things, and your suicide prevention kind of stuff in the initial volunteer application orientation? Do you think there's too much to do in a day for someone?
That's a lot. I mean, this is a debate we kind of have too.
Yeah, and we have a separate orientation for general volunteers than we do for peer mentors. And the general volunteer orientation is
2 hours. We offer it twice a month, so it's more of what are their tasks. We do talk about language and etiquette
We always
and
do that,
communication and working with others with different disabilities.
But I was going to ask if you had kind of laid out how you do the training yet, in terms of how many days or how frequent, that piece of this, what we're calling orientation for peer mentor training. Maybe that overview would be helpful if you didn't do that while I was asking.
If you look in the ABIL Peer Mentor Training Manual, we've given you an agenda in there, so it maps out, where the time frames we use for each thing. So it kind of lays it out for you a little bit.
So it's like three 4-hour segments or 3-3-hour segments, or?
Well, it's 10 hours.
10 hours total.
Yeah.
Spread out.
Yeah, spread out.
So it's not all in one day.
5.5 one day, 4.5 the next.
Right, and that addresses the issue for us. A lot of our participants are dirt poor. What we're moving away from is that we provide transportation, we provide food, we provide all these things for you, we provide all these incentives for you to come and do something that you say is really important to you. That you say is something that's going to be a career builder and that's going to enrich you directly. We're trying to go towards a model that says something like, if you can get here, we're going to try and simplify and streamline it for you, but we want, there's an in-between, right? They're saying, we're going to try and streamline this for you and get as much of the documentation done as possible and everything, and save your caller ride money, because $8 is a lot of money for some people.
Yeah, we do provide transportation if they need that help in, and as we do provide mileage reimbursement, and the ones who need it ask for it, and a bunch of them never ask for it. And so, but we, as I said, we started out in the early days having a 40-hour training, and
Right.
nobody has that time for that commitment. And as it is, sometimes we have somebody really raring to go that she's got to kind of on the fly and will on the fly do some training for them. But that's why we don't do it all in one day. Number one, you can't absorb. You can only absorb so much, and you want them to have time to think about it and come back with their questions.
Yeah.
And so this is the compromise that we've come up with. That's a pretty good deal, and it's a commitment they need to have if they. It's the first commitment they have to have if they want to be a peer mentor, is they have to come through the training.
Right.
Just to clarify that then, so you guys do a 2-day specific training, and there's
For
not
peer mentors.
right, and the volunteer training for peer mentors is rolled into the first day, or
No, I'm saying we have a separate
We have
general
two separate.
volunteer. They come in
Right.
to do administrative help or whatever.
Right.
That's a 2-hour orientation,
Okay.
totally different. If they've applied to be a peer mentor, they've gone through an interview, they filled out an application, and then their next step is to come in and go through this 2-day, and often it's not in a row, it might skip a day, or sometimes it's 2 days in a row, training, and that's the commitment they make.
Right.
And sometimes there is literally a justifiable reason because of medical issues or whatever, but that's a basic requirement.
Thank you.
This is
That-
the peer mentor volunteer.
The peer mentor volunteer, because our peer mentor program is a volunteer program.
So we have two, think of it this way. So I think of it as two separate things, that I coordinate two separate programs. General volunteer, basic application, character references, fingerprinting, 2-hour orientation. Those are people that are going to come help in the offices. Those are the people that are going to come to events and, help
Fold papers,
fold
enter
stuff,
data,
envelopes.
whatever the staff want them to do.
Peer mentor volunteer, higher level skill, higher level training, higher level of requirements.
Higher level of responsibility,
Yeah.
therefore higher level of commitment.
Right, yeah.
And we used to hardly have any of those general volunteers. It was when we moved into the
Yeah.
DEC,
Yeah.
the Disability Empowerment Center that we just moved into 5 years ago, that we went from having like 5 volunteers to 40, because people love to come to the center. There's 12 other organizations co-located. It's beautiful, and they just love it. And so we always, before our other center, which was divided in littler offices and stuff, there was never anybody there. They were all out in the community. But now it is seen as a community center in a way that it wasn't before. And so her job has gotten harder and more full-time because of this explosion of general volunteers. And we have a general volunteer group that comes in once a month to do a big project. So if there's packets to be developed for conferences or something, or different things, because they like the camaraderie, something to do, we give them food, and we'll give them free transportation that day to come in if they need it.
Could I ask what the training is, the 2-hour training generally for regular volunteer?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking about it this morning. We have our, policy procedure list, which maps it out. So if anybody wants to see that,
Yeah, we could email that
we
to
can
you.
email it later on.
Okay.
Okay, so the general volunteer, they're first going to fill out an application. They've got to provide 3 character references. They're going to send that back in to me, and I'm going to give them a call or meet with them just to generally find out what are they looking for, how often can they work, that kind of thing. We're going to have them come in through our training. So the training is Ed Roberts' video, and it's a short little video we did, probably getting maybe too old for me to use it anymore, from our 25th anniversary, but it talks a little bit about our programs.
About ABIL.
Then I go through what's independent living philosophy, people first language, and disability awareness and etiquette. And that is literally the same stuff from this training, because that's the most important stuff I want to give people before I throw them in with our staff and other volunteers. I want to make sure that they're comfortable and understand that. No,
Not for that
Not
one.
for the training, I don't, because
Not
it's
for
only
the
2
2-hour
hours.
orientation. No.
But and then then I'll do a fingerprint with them while they're there in the office. So that's the orientation training. Then on their first day, sometimes they're working with the staff person that has the project. So like one of our staff, she's a filing clerk. So I will actually go and introduce the volunteer to her. They're going to be her helper. They want to do filing. And I'll sit with them, help them get oriented to their project. And then she's there to supervise them as they work through the day.
Another one helped us, we just redid our disability survival manual. Now it's called a guide. It's like a really cool magazine all about independent living, different programs, lots of photographs for people who are newly injured. And at the back there's like an INR section and things. Well, it was a volunteer that worked with our INR person to do some of that research to make sure all those contacts were updated. So they could be working with the finance department, they could be working with anybody in the center helping do things. And then there's that one group that comes in, or for special occasions she'll call in some people to help. So sometimes she's got 20 volunteers at a time doing a project on that one time a month. So she created all that.
Yeah,
Not me.
I made a lot of work.
So
for
if you get a
myself.
volunteer coordinator, but yeah.
But you bring up a good point about really this has forced us to be aware of what we can manage. So there are times where I'll come to Amina and say, I'm out of projects, just want to let you know I'm not going to take any new general volunteer applications for a while.
Yeah.
Because the most important thing is for the staff, I don't want them to feel like they're having to hunt projects for somebody, that they're it's not supposed to be stressful. It's supposed to be, somebody comes in, we have work for them.
And we also don't want group homes dumping people at our door in mass. And we've had them try that, including for our Living Well program, and that doesn't work. So we had to set some boundaries also.
So there's
a lady over
limit,
here first.
Stuck here. Sherry Burns with Krill, Hayward, California. Yeah, so this peer mentoring training that you're doing with us is part of our overhauling and restructuring our volunteer program, which includes the peer mentoring piece of it. So I appreciate the questions about separately how you handle volunteers. I noticed that you have a pretty generic peer mentoring job description that you've included in the packet. Thank you so much. With your other volunteers, do you have individual volunteer job descriptions? Because that's something we're looking at now is should we put together specific job descriptions for different duties and responsibilities or activities that we have in order to try to match better when we have an application come in from someone?
We do have that, yeah. And so we have a job description very similar to the general one that we have for the peer mentors. We have that for the general volunteers as well. So what's their process? And then we list out, it's general, but it lists out what programs they might work with and how we refer to that program. So it's more for the staff, for us to know, how would we refer, who does the training, who does the supervision, of the day-to-day stuff. So it does outline that for us.
So then she works with the staff that she has to know. So again, the one person in the whole agency, more than anybody else, more than any other manager, program manager, or our CEO, knows other staff and other units, because she takes it on herself to get to know whoever that person is that's going to supervise them, in turn to make sure they're doing a good job supervising, because everybody doesn't necessarily have management skills, like a filing clerk who thinks she owns our building, for instance.
She's very territorial.
Very territorial.
But once she loves the mentor, she loves
filing
them.
clerk. She's so detail-oriented. But working with a volunteer, we had to work with her a little bit about that, to get it clear. And same thing for the volunteer. They may need stuff written down about what their job is, and so then we do that at hand. But because it's just been so individual where they went or what they did, we haven't created separate jobs to go with one unit.
Now, one thing we did we have a separate general volunteer policy agreement. So we really, like what we did later, I'll show you in a minute, but what we did for the peer mentors as well as policy agreement, what they can expect from us, we did that for the volunteers. So we go over that in the orientation. You should expect that you are trained on your job. You should expect that there's a sample, an example for you if you're making a packet. Staff will return your phone calls. If we need to cancel, this is what we're going to do. So it really outlines for them, and that's been really helpful for the volunteers, so they know, this is a drug-free, weapons-free environment. This is a harassment-free environment. We expect that you would be treated with respect, and if there's a situation where you're uncomfortable, this is who you talk to, this is what you do.
And any staff that's going to supervise them sees that same document.
Yeah.
To help remind him. I just need to check in. There's like 5 minutes before break, and we've
I know.
got
We're
quite
okay.
a few slides, which is fine because this is important, but I just want you to know where we're at.
I know. We're okay. Thank you. So crisis intervention, that's on page 98. we've talked about this a little bit, but you actually have the form. There's a signed copy that they sign off on at peer mentor training with, and then they also have a copy for themselves that we have them keep. Volunteer form section, that's 105 from 116. We have our peer mentor volunteer description, so that's what are their duties. We have our rules and guidelines form, so that has things like, I don't drive my mentee. This is not a dating relationship.
I don't give them money.
I don't give them money. How much contact am I agreeing to have? So it really outlines for the peer mentors, and they have to sign that sheet as well before they in the training.
And that's been developed by the scientific method of trial and error?
Yes. Yeah. Right.
So it continually gets updated periodically when something new comes up.
And then we have our volunteer timesheet in there. We've recently changed that, so it's an Excel chart, which people like a little bit more than. And so it's a timesheet and reimbursement sheet kind of combined.
So they can do that on the internet now, right?
Yeah.
The time.
Yeah. And they do that at the end of every month. And again, I think we've talked about this a little bit. There's always follow-up training that we can do. If I have somebody coming in that I know they've never worked with an individual with a particular disability, before we even match them, we'll come in and do some conversations and some training. And I had a lady that was going to be working with an individual with Asperger's. And so we had a couple of conversations, and she said, give me some materials to look through. And she just got really excited, and she called me in one day and said, I think there might be a few people in my family that have this. She just really got excited about working with that group of people, and so it was completely new to her, but it was something that she really became comfortable with. So that coaching, that kind of training, that's something that goes on all the time. Last week I went to training on technology with one of my mentors because her mentee is going to be needing that. So we went and sat in on a training ABIL had from another agency. So a lot of the mentors do that as needed. We've talked a little bit about the group, which we'll go on and talk about later today. But these are all the kind of follow-up opportunities that we offer. So classes, workshops, classes on self-advocacy, specific community resources. We have volunteers. Sometimes we have them come to our conferences. If we're doing a conference, they come to the African American Disability Symposium. They'll come to, maybe there's a conference and we got a couple of extra tickets. We'll have them come. So they usually jump at any opportunity to hear and have more training or more education about topics. So.
Give us ideas about what else we need to
do. Right. Yeah. No, they've been very helpful in saying, hey, we need this training. Like I mentioned yesterday, like someone had said, we need a training on end-of-life issues and living wills, and so we did that.
Or more recently, one of the persons on the ABIL Council, who, is he also a trained mentor?
Who are you talking about?
Maria and Hector?
No, Hector's a volunteer, though.
Yeah, he's a general volunteer, but he wants to get more involved, and so he recently, was it his idea to do the gardening group?
Well, Hector and I, he's looking for more opportunities, so him and I were talking, and I said, what about doing a group with the volunteers and the consumers on gardening? So we kind of brainstormed
so
that.
So he was a general volunteer that also went through on the independent living community integration side through the ABIL Council, decided he wanted to move on and do something different, but he didn't know what, and he doesn't really want to do one-on-one mentoring. That's not his thing. So then he did this, so now we've got plants growing. We have lots of window space at our place, so we've got herbs growing in the building.
Yeah. And he comes and checks them. I'm not near them because I have a brown thumb, so he takes care of those for me. So we're going to head for break. I think it's a 15-minute break. Okay. Thank you.